Welcome to the deep dive. We're going to be tackling some really big questions about the future of humanity, in the 21st century. And for this deep dive, we'll be using Yuval Noah Harari's Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow.
It's a fascinating book. It offers a really thought-provoking look at where we might be headed,
Right.
based on historical trends and technological advancements and how our philosophies are kind of evolving.
So Harari starts off with a pretty bold claim. He argues that in the 20th century, humanity basically conquered famine, plague, and war, like things that for most of history were considered inevitable tragedies.
Yeah, and he really brings that point home with a striking statistic. He points out that obesity now kills more people than famine and malnutrition combined.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, it's a total paradigm shift.
Mm.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Harari argues that this very success in overcoming these, existential threats has actually created new ones.
Yet it's true. Think about it. The only times we've seen significant decreases in greenhouse gas emissions have been during economic crises.
Oh, wow.
And that really highlights the tension between, our desire for economic growth and the stability of our planet.
Yeah, it's like we're stuck in this loop. We need economic growth, but that growth is harming the very environment we depend on.
Right.
And Harari points out this tendency we have to just assume that future technology will fix it rather than, making those really tough choices in the present.
It's like we're kicking the can down the road,
Yeah.
but the can gets bigger and heavier with every kick.
Yeah, for sure. So where does this lead us?
Well, Harari argues that humanity's main pursuits in the 21st century will be immortality, bliss, and divinity.
Whoa, hold on. Immortality, bliss, divinity. That sounds almost like becoming gods.
In a sense, yes.
Yeah.
These pursuits, Harari argues, stem from what he calls the dominant modern religion, humanism,
Okay.
which essentially places human life and human desires at the center of everything.
So it's not about traditional gods anymore, but about elevating humanity to a godlike level.
Precisely. And this has some really interesting consequences, and sometimes unsettling ones. He uses this thought-provoking example of a scientist justifying, potentially cruel genetic manipulations of farm animals.
Oh, okay.
And their justification is consumer demand for cheap meat.
Oh, wow.
And it really highlights this idea within humanism that the customer is always right, even when the customer might be demanding something ethically questionable.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What happens when our desires kind of clash with our ethical responsibilities? But before we go too far down that road, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about the power of stories. Harari dives into how stories throughout history have shaped societies and how this continues to play out today.
He's not just talking about, fairy tales or myths. He's talking about the stories we tell ourselves about everything, from religion and politics to economics.
Mm-hmm.
These stories shape how we see the world, how we interact with each other, and even how we justify our actions.
So like how the ancient Greeks believed in their gods, and that shaped their entire culture, their art, their laws, their understanding of the world.
Exactly. And what Harari argues is that religions, in particular, give this kind of superhuman legitimacy to human social structures. They claim to reflect some kind of higher, unchanging law, which gives them immense authority.
And he uses a really powerful example to illustrate this point, right?
Yes. He talks about a Nazi officer justifying the Holocaust by appealing to what he saw as the laws of nature.
Oh, right.
It's a really stark reminder of how potent these stories can be, even when they lead to horrific outcomes.
It's like we're wired to believe in stories, and those stories have this incredible power to influence our behavior for better or for worse.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the past. Harari points out that what he calls intersubjective realities are becoming increasingly powerful in our lives.
Intersubjective realities, what are those?
Think about things like nations, corporations, even money. These things don't exist in the physical world in the same way a tree or a rock does. They exist in our collective imagination, the shared stories we tell ourselves.
So we all agree that, say, the United States exists and that agreement gives it power, even though it's ultimately just an idea we all buy into.
Exactly. These intersubjective realities shape our laws, our economies, even our personal identities. They are incredibly powerful forces in the world.
Okay, so we've got these intertwined threads. Humanity's triumphs and the new challenges they create, the rise of humanism and its focus on our desires and this deep understanding of how stories shape our realities. But there's this underlying paradox, isn't there? Humanism, despite its emphasis on reason and experience, can also lead to kind of blind faith, right?
That's a really crucial insight. Even with his emphasis on logic and evidence, humanism often ends up putting blind faith in feelings and desires as the ultimate source of meaning. It's like we think we're being rational, but really we're just following our gut instincts.
And this is where Harari introduces the concept of what he calls techno-religions.
Right. He argues that these new techno-religions are emerging. Things like techno-humanism and data religion, which try to use technology to either upgrade humans or transcend them altogether. They offer pathways to those humanist goals of immortality, bliss, and divinity. But they also challenge some of the core tenets of traditional humanism.
Okay, so let's unpack these techno-religions. First up, what exactly is techno-humanism?
So techno-humanism, you can think of it as humanism 2.0. It aims to use technology to create Homo Deus. It's a superior human model. We're talking bioenhancements, genetic engineering, merging our minds with machines, all pushing the boundaries of what it means to be human.
So like in those sci-fi movies where people have like superhuman strength or can teleport.
Well, some of it might sound far-fetched, but the reality is that we're closer than you might think. Harari talks about things like transcranial helmets that can be used to control emotions or improve cognitive abilities.
Seriously, a helmet you can wear that can change how you feel or think.
It sounds wild, I know. He shares this captivating anecdote about a journalist who used one of these helmets to enhance her sniping skills in a virtual battlefield simulation. She was able to overcome her fear and significantly improve her performance.
That is wild. But I can also see the potential downsides. What if this kind of technology is only available to the wealthy? It could create an even wider gap between the haves and have-nots.
You're hitting on one of the major ethical concerns surrounding techno-humanism. It has the potential to widen social gaps and create a world where some humans are significantly more enhanced than others.
And what happens to those humanist values we were talking about if technology allows us to re-engineer our desires and feelings? Imagine Romeo and Juliet choosing a technological fix for their forbidden love rather than experiencing the raw, messy emotions of their situation. It makes you wonder what it even means to be human in a world like that.
It's a very thought-provoking question. And it leads us to the other techno-religion Harari discusses, data religion.
Okay, data religion. This one's a bit harder for me to wrap my head around. What's the main idea here?
Data religion is a more radical idea. It basically views human consciousness as an outdated algorithm.
An algorithm, like a computer program.
Exactly. Dataism, as it's sometimes called, believes that the flow of information is the most important thing in the universe. And humans are simply tools for creating this godlike data processing system. Eventually, datists believe that this system will encompass the entire universe.
So instead of focusing on individual humans, it's about creating this massive network of information that's constantly evolving. It's almost like the internet, but on a cosmic scale.
That's a good way to put it. And this raises some really profound questions. What happens to our sense of self, our values, our understanding of what it means to be human if human experience becomes just another piece of data to be processed?
It's almost as if we're being reduced to ones and zeros in some giant cosmic computer. What does that even mean for human values and purpose? Does it all become meaningless?
These are exactly the questions Harari wants us to consider. If human experience becomes just another designable product, how will this reshape our understanding of ourselves and our place in the universe?
Okay, my brain is officially starting to hurt. We're talking about some really heady stuff here.
We are.
But it's also incredibly fascinating, and I think it's important to have these conversations. So where do we go from here? What else does Harari have in store for us on this deep dive?
Let's explore some specific examples from the book that kind of bring these, abstract ideas to life. We'll see how these forces are already playing out in the world around us, and you can start to consider how they might impact your own life.
Sounds like a plan. Let's dive in.
Welcome back. Last time we kind of set the stage for our exploration of humanity's future, drawing on those insights from Yuval Noah Harari's Homo Deus. We covered, the decline of those age-old threats, famine, plague, and war, and the rise of humanism and those really ambitious pursuits of immortality, bliss, and even divinity.
It was a lot to take in. But I think we're ready to dive even deeper into those fascinating and sometimes unsettling techno-religions that Harari describes, techno-humanism and data religion.
Excellent. Let's start with techno-humanism. As we discussed, it sees technology as the key to upgrading humans, to creating Homo Deus that superior human model.
Right. It's all about using bioenhancements, genetic engineering, and, brain-computer interfaces to really push the boundaries of human potential. It's a pretty radical idea when you think about it.
It is. And Harari gives some really interesting real-world examples of how this is already starting to happen. For example, he discusses the research being done on using transcranial magnetic stimulation,
Mhm.
or TMS, to treat depression and other mental health
I
conditions.
remember reading about that. It's like using magnets to stimulate specific parts of the brain, right?
Exactly. And while this technology is still in its early stages, it has the potential to, you know, revolutionize how we treat mental illness. Imagine a world where depression, anxiety, even PTSD
Yeah.
could be treated not with medication, but with targeted magnetic stimulation. It's a pretty remarkable possibility.
It is. But as we touched on earlier, there are also concerns about the potential for misuse. What happens when these technologies are used not for, medical purposes, but to enhance cognitive abilities or even to manipulate emotions in healthy individuals?
That's one of the big ethical quandaries that techno-humanism raises.
Mm.
Imagine a world where people can use technology to, like, boost their intelligence, improve their memory, even control their feelings. It could create a society where some individuals have a significant advantage over others. What happens to our ideas of fairness and equality in a world like that?
Yeah, it's like those superhero movies where some people have superpowers and others are just like ordinary folks.
Yeah.
It creates this like whole new level of inequality. And then there's genetic engineering. Harari talks about the potential for designer babies and gene editing too, right?
Absolutely. That's another key aspect of techno-humanism. And it's not just science fiction anymore. We're already seeing the emergence of technologies like CRISPR, which allows scientists to edit genes with incredible precision.
I've heard about CRISPR. It's like a cut and paste tool for DNA, right?
You can think of it that way. And while this technology has the potential to, cure genetic diseases, it also raises those serious ethical concerns about designer babies and the potential for widening social inequalities. What happens when the wealthy can essentially design their children to be superior?
And what happens to the diversity of the human species if everyone starts selecting for the same traits? It's a lot to think about. Techno-humanism really does have the potential to both improve our lives and create a whole host of new problems.
It's a double-edged sword. And these are conversations we need to be having now, before these technologies become so commonplace that we're caught off guard by the ethical implications.
Okay, let's shift gears now and talk about data religion. This one is a bit harder for me to wrap my head around. It's a pretty radical concept.
It is. As we discussed earlier, data religion views the universe as this vast flow of information, and it places the highest value on maximizing that flow. It sees patterns and connections everywhere, and it believes that these patterns hold the key to understanding the universe and our place within it.
And humans, in this view, are seen as just one type of data processor, not necessarily the most important or advanced one.
Exactly. Data religion suggests that we are on the verge of creating this new kind of entity, the Internet of all things, a network that will surpass human intelligence and eventually encompass everything.
It sounds almost like the ultimate merger of technology and consciousness, but without the human element.
You can say that. And this raises some very profound questions about the future of consciousness itself. If we're just data processors, what happens to our sense of self, our emotions, our experiences?
It's almost as if we're being reduced to just algorithms. What does that mean for how we value human life? Does human experience become meaningless?
These are the kinds of questions that data religion grapples with. It challenges us to rethink our assumptions about consciousness and what it means to be human in a world where information is the ultimate currency.
Okay, that's a lot to absorb. Can you give me some more concrete examples of how this data religion might manifest in the real world?
Think about the way we interact with technology, especially social media platforms like Facebook or TikTok. They're constantly collecting these vast amounts of data about our behavior, our preferences, our relationships.
And they use that data to target us with ads, to recommend content, even to influence our opinions.
Exactly. And as these platforms become more sophisticated, as they gather more and more data, they're starting to resemble those all-knowing entities that data religion imagines. And this is just the beginning. Think about the rise of artificial intelligence. AI systems are becoming increasingly capable of, performing tasks that were once thought to require human intelligence, like driving cars, diagnosing diseases, even composing music.
It's impressive and a little unsettling when you think about how rapidly this technology is
And
advancing.
as AI systems continue to evolve, they're likely to play an even larger role in our lives. They'll make decisions that affect us in profound ways, from what news we see to what jobs we get to who we even fall in love with.
Okay, so we have these two techno-religions, techno-humanism and data religion, offering very different visions of the future. One is about upgrading humans. The other is about transcending humanity altogether. It's a lot to process.
It is. And both raise those profound questions about what it means to be human in the age of technology. What happens to our values? What happens to our sense of purpose?
It makes you wonder what kind of world our children and grandchildren will inherit. I want to make sure I'm doing everything I can to help shape a future where technology serves humanity rather than the other way around.
I think that's a sentiment that many people share. And that brings us to a really important point. Harari argues that we're not just passive bystanders in this technological revolution. We have choices to make, and those choices will shape the future of humanity.
So what can we do? Where do we even begin?
Well, one thing Harari stresses is the importance of, becoming more aware of the forces that are shaping our world. We
Right.
need to understand how these technologies work, what their potential benefits and risks are. We need to be critical thinkers.
I agree. It's easy to just get swept up in the excitement of, new gadgets and new possibilities without really stopping to think about the long-term implications.
Exactly. We need to ask ourselves those tough questions. What values do we want to guide the development of these technologies? How can we ensure that these technologies are used for good?
It's like we need to become more conscious creators of the future rather than just consumers of whatever new technology comes along.
Exactly. And this leads us to one of Harari's most compelling arguments. He says that the stories we tell ourselves, the narratives we believe in, have an incredibly powerful influence on our behavior and even on our reality.
We touched on this earlier when we talked about, the stories we tell about nations and money. They only exist because we agree they exist. But you're saying this goes even deeper.
Much deeper. Harari argues that the stories we tell ourselves about progress, about human nature, about the role of technology, all of these stories shape our understanding of the world and our place within it.
So we need to become more aware of the stories we're telling ourselves and to be willing to question them, to challenge them, even to rewrite them if they no longer serve us.
Precisely. We need to become the authors of our own stories, both individually and collectively, because ultimately the future of humanity isn't going to be determined by algorithms or by technology alone. It's going to be shaped by the choices we make, the stories we believe, and the actions we take.
Wow. That's a powerful message. It's a lot of responsibility, but it's also incredibly empowering. It means we have more agency than we might think.
And that brings us to the big question.
Yeah.
What kind of future do we want to create?
Okay. My brain is definitely full, but I'm also feeling incredibly inspired. I think we've laid a good foundation for understanding the key themes and ideas in Harari's book. But this is a conversation that I think we could continue for hours.
And we will. In part 3 of our deep dive into Homo Deus, we'll explore some specific actions we can take to shape a future where technology empowers humanity. We'll talk about the role of education, the importance of ethics, and the need for new forms of political participation in a world where technology is changing everything.
It's going to be a fascinating conversation. So buckle up, listeners, and get ready to dive even deeper into the future of humanity.
We'll see you soon.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of Yuval Noah Harari's Homo Deus. This deep dive has really pushed me to think in new ways about the future and about the role we all play in shaping that future.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? We've covered so much ground.
Oh.
From the decline of those age-old threats, famine, plague, and war, to the rise of humanism and the pursuit of immortality, bliss, and even divinity.
And of course, who could forget those techno-religions, techno-humanism and data religion? They're already starting to reshape our world in some really profound ways, and I think they're going to play an even bigger role in the years to come.
It's true. And they raise those fundamental questions about what it means to be human in a world where technology is advancing so rapidly.
Mm.
We've explored both the potential benefits and the risks of these really powerful forces.
But I think the most important takeaway for me is this. We're not passive bystanders in this technological revolution. We have agency. We have choices to make. And those choices will determine what kind of future we create.
Absolutely. The future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we're actively creating through our choices and our actions.
So let's talk about what we can do. How can we become more conscious creators of the future rather than just consumers of whatever new technology comes along? Where do we even begin?
Well, I think it starts with education. We need to make sure that people um, understand how these technologies work, what their potential benefits and risks are, and how they're already shaping our world.
We need to cultivate critical thinking skills. We need to encourage people to ask those tough questions about the values that are embedded in these technologies. Whose interests are being served? What are the unintended consequences?
It's not about, rejecting technology altogether. It's about using it wisely, ethically, and with intention. It's about making sure that technology serves humanity rather than the other way around.
Yeah, it's about taking responsibility. And Harari emphasizes the importance of um, developing new forms of political participation that are better suited to this digital age.
That's right. Our current political systems, designed for a much slower pace of change, are they're really struggling to keep up with this exponential growth of technology.
Hmm.
We need to find ways to make our democracies more agile, more responsive, and more inclusive.
We need to find ways to empower citizens to participate in shaping the future of technology, whether it's through online voting, virtual town halls, or citizen assemblies. We need to find ways to make sure that everyone has a voice.
And we need to make sure that those voices are heard. That means addressing issues of digital literacy and access, ensuring that everyone has the tools and the knowledge they need to participate in this digital world.
Harari also talks about the importance of cultivating wisdom. In a world where information is so readily available, it's more important than ever to be able to discern truth from falsehood, to distinguish signal from noise.
It's not just about accumulating knowledge. It's about developing the discernment, the critical thinking skills, and the ethical framework to apply that knowledge wisely.
And in the end, it comes down to the stories we tell ourselves. As Harari reminds us, these stories have an incredibly powerful influence on our behavior and on the world we create. If we want to create a better future, we need to start, telling ourselves a better story.
A story that's grounded in compassion, in wisdom, in a deep understanding of our interconnectedness.
Yeah.
A story that recognizes our shared humanity and our responsibility to care for each other and for the planet.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into Homo Deus, I want to leave you with this thought. The future isn't something that's happening to us. It's something we're creating together. Right now, in this very moment.
It's time to start writing a new story for humanity.
Yeah.
A story that's full of hope, possibility, and a deep commitment to creating a world that works for everyone.
And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, we can create a future that's even better than we can imagine. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.